Buggin Out has finally managed to kind of get a couple of people together, including Radio Raheem, who's a fucking one-man army, he's a tank. Him and Raheem, I don't know how good friends they are. Raheem seems to just be wandering around with his boombox the whole time. It starts escalating, they start screaming and shouting at each other, and it gets to the point where Sal destroys his boombox, smashes it to pieces.
What I tell you about that noise? What I tell you about the pitch? What the fuck are you deaf? Are you? You
You gotta fight the power, because this week it's Do the Right Thing from 1988, directed by Spike Lee.
In Harlem, on the hottest day of the year, racial tensions boil over, leading to tragic consequences.
After being inspired by the Howard Beach incident, in which a group of white youths attacked a group of black men, leading to the death of one of them, and various other racial tensions that were going on at the time in the 80s in America, Spike Lee got inspired and found himself in Martha's Vineyard, banging out the script in just 2 weeks. For the production, they rented a whole Harlem block and built the sets in real buildings, including Sal's Pizza Shop, which was so convincing locals would wander into Sal's Pizza Shop looking for pizza. It was a living, breathing, real-life set. Kind of like if you've ever been to Universal Studios and you're walking through their movie lot, B-lot sets, you know, a street in New York in one part and then an old Western outback ranch around the corner. And that really comes across because there's so many great characters in this film. It's really a film about the characters. You couldn't say it has a plot as such. It more has a bunch of interesting characters with a theme behind it and a couple of inciting incidents. More than that, and I always kind of remembered this, that the block itself feels like a character. It has such a vibe and feeling to it. He really creates an environment that you feel like is living and breathing.
Important thing for me was to design sets, to design a pizzeria, a Korean market, a DJ, a radio station that people would think had been there for years and years and years and years and years. And they would come and they would see these things and they wouldn't know that they're sets. And I think we've been pretty successful because people keep trying to shop at the Korean market and they keep trying to come into the pizzeria to buy pizza.
What Spike Lee does a good job of is, straight away as the film opens, you get that booming Public Enemy. That song that obviously has become famous as hell now. Elvis is my hero, but he's a racist, like, you know, in that booming voice. So you've got Tina, who we later find out is Mookie's girlfriend, played by Rosie Perez, who also stars in White Men Can't Jump. Shadowboxing. You know, if you've seen loads of Spike Lee films before seeing Do the Right Thing and you didn't know anything about this and you turned it on straight away, you'd be like, oh, this is a Spike Lee film without knowing it's a Spike Lee film. And you know, that use of Public Enemy and the footage of like the block and her shadowboxing, as a viewer, you said earlier about the block being a character in itself, it just automatically transported me to the streets of Harlem within seconds. It was just beautiful.
He got in touch with Public Enemy asking them to write a specific song that would be kind of like the anthem of the film, which again, that was huge in the 80s for films like Mannequin and shit, where you had like, never gonna do it now. Yeah. But for these sort of films, that's not something that would happen. But again, it's just another interesting touch that you don't usually get for these kind of films.
I needed a song that was going to be like an anthem. This song, Fight the Powers, is in the movie Do the Right Thing like 13, 14 times. And it had to be an angry song. And I think this film is going to be the anthem this summer.
Me and Spike been working on this for about a year. You know, we sat down a year ago and came back a year later and said, hey, it is.
At times, Spike Lee has his real theatrical, unusual, stylized filmmaking telling the story. He never really deals in fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that. His films are very grounded. They're basically almost always about race and racial tensions. They're not exactly Disney, you know, they're very cynical and very realistic. But he has this real unusual, playful way with the camera of how he likes to move it around. It kind of reminds me a little bit, it's a more subtle example, but Martin Scorsese from Goodfellas onwards, where he would really get playful with the camera and you couldn't necessarily put your finger on why. It's kind of like the way editing can trick your mind. You know how famously Psycho in the shower scene, Hitchcock never actually shows her getting stabbed or the blade going into her. If you cut all the pieces and look at them individually without being pieced together in that specific way, it's actually kind of like, what am I even looking at? You know, there's a trickle of blood going through the shower, there's a scream, there's the knife going down, there's the shower curtain being pulled. But when assembled and put in that specific order, your mind weirdly fills in the gaps and you honestly believe you're seeing something that isn't actually ever shown. The image is never there, but you see it in your mind's eye. And it's the same thing where, you know, Scorsese, I remember at one point later in the film when he's starting to, you know, sell drugs and do drugs on the side and becoming paranoid. Henry Hill speaking in a payphone and the camera starts off really far away as he jumps on the payphone, but then it zooms into him and the camera's like right close and fixed into a close-up within like a second or two. And there's something about it where it adds to your feeling. It invokes a feeling the same way you throw some sad music on during a sad scene to, you know, help the audience along to get to the feeling you're trying to get them to in that particular moment. And Spike Lee is even more creative in a way. You know, he loves the Jaws shot where the camera's dollying in or out, but it's also zooming the opposite direction, so it creates that bizarre thing where the background seems to change but the central person in the foreground doesn't. But there's also just odd things where you can't put your finger on why it worked. There's a moment later where Mookie is working for Sal in Sal's pizza shop and his sister comes in and Sal is just fucking drooling all over his sister, and his sister loves the attention and maybe even kind of feels the same way a little bit. You know, she likes him, definitely likes him as a person anyway. Mookie's there and it's awkward for him because it's his sister and his boss who are blatantly flirting with each other right in front of him. You've got Sal's son, played by John Turturro, the great guy, you know, Barton Fink and all those brilliant performances.
Great actor.
And he's racist and he's kind of sick of black people. He doesn't want to live in this neighbourhood with all these black people who hate him and he hates them. And he's fucking awkward because he's like, my fucking dad is flirting with this black chick and it's Mookie's sister right in front of him. And the camera just kind of dollies past their faces in these extreme close-ups. Really close, completely different to the composition and the setup of how the sister and Sal are being filmed. And it perfectly conveys that moment when you're kind of, you know, when everyone's in a room together and something's going on between two people and everyone else is kind of like, not necessarily even looking at each other, but kind of like looking around like, is this happening? Are you all seeing this? And it just perfectly shows how good Spike Lee is using his camera to get involved. In a way, it might take you out of the film. It doesn't take me out of the film, but certain people have that. I'm not a big fan of handheld camera shots in majority of films, unless it's kind of a documentary style. I always find it just reminds me, oh, there's someone holding a camera. It's a film I'm watching. But it's funny that it's in such a grounded, realistic film that he takes those choices. And it's not just the camera work, it's also the writing at times. You know, he's got the three drunk layabouts who are sitting on the corner the whole time. And he borrowed that whole idea from Greek tragedies and plays, because you'd have that chorus set, the guys on the side who would comment on the story throughout. You know, it's a writing device. And he has them commenting on what's going on and kind of giving wisdom or arguing between each other at times. And it's a way to express ideas on the side in between the scenes.
Fuck Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson ain't shit. I remember when he mugged that woman right there on Lexington. Remember that shit?
And you were going to tell him that?
I'll tell him that. I ain't fuck Mike Tyson.
To his face.
That's you goddamn
Mike
right.
Tyson, I'm not
I
your
ain't scared of no
goddamn
goddamn Mike Tyson.
And also at times, not breaking the fourth wall, but completely out of the story. You know, out of what's actually happening to the characters' moments, like the famous racial slurs scene where you just get into the mind of the characters and they just start throwing all the racial slurs they feel about and what other race they is, just anyone who isn't the race that they are.
Dago Wop, Guinea, garlic bread, pizza slinging, spaghetti bending, Victimone, Perry Como, Luciano Pavarotti, solo meal, non-singer motherfucker.
Yo! Hold up! Time out! Time out!
Or moments where the lighting completely changes and stuff to something that isn't actually happening in the moment but works within the context of the film. And it's such a fun blend because you don't really ever get those kind of creative touches and finesses from directors when making these sort of films. It just doesn't really happen, and it's a shame because there's no reason why it shouldn't.
I found the use of shots very interesting as well, Declan, and I think you're bang on about his use of close-ups. The claustrophobia and awkwardness of that scene for Mookie, and I put myself in his shoes, how uncomfortable it must be for him. It was such a great use of shots, and he does that throughout the film. And the corner guys, who just sit there, maybe unemployed, or maybe, it doesn't say what day of the week this film's on, does it?
One of them mentions payday at once, because he sees some sexy woman walk past and he's like, I better not see that bitch on payday.
It is a Saturday because at the start he's in bed, isn't he, and his sister says, get off me, Mookie, it's Saturday, it's the only time I can sleep. So yeah, it is Saturday.
Because Mookie lives with his sister, doesn't live with Tina, who she also has a son with. She also lives with her mum. She often will actually order pizza to her place just as an opportunity to see him, because obviously they don't get to see each other too much. You know, she's fiery Latino who's always yelling at him and being like, when are you going to get a place for us, and when are we going to do this? His sister's always badgering him, being like, you know, I know you're earning money, but you're not earning much money there. You never held down a job. When are you going to get out of here? I want you gone. And so Mookie. Is a friend of ours who is actually also a tiny black guy, like Spike Lee, interestingly. So that's probably going to happen a few times. He is kind of disgruntled. He seems to be liked by everyone. And also, we didn't even touch that he's played by Spike Lee, who I think does a pretty good job. He's probably up there with Tarantino as one of the better directors who act in their own films with a non-acting background.
I still, to this day, do not consider myself an actor. You know, I do okay, but it's just leverage that I could use, you know, trying to get my films made. And if people come to see me in a film, is that much easier for me to make a movie.
All the corner men scenes, the dialogue's all improvised. Getting the idea from the Greek tragedies where they would be kind of off centre stage, but making their comments, contributing to it. You know, they're drinking, they're shooting the shit, they're catching the breeze or whatever the saying is. And I love the conversation they're having in one of the scenes where someone brings up Mike Tyson, and we actually see there's like a big mural of Mike Tyson throughout the film, and it says like Brooklyn's own. This guy's going, of course I could take Mike Tyson, and that's a conversation I've had with my mates loads of times. Like, oh, I could take that boxer or this boxer.
That is the kind of dumb classic conversations you have with your mates when you're just sitting around. I remember a big debate that raged on for years when we were teenagers was who would win in a fight, Mike Tyson or Bruce Lee?
Yeah.
And then we got a little bit older and kind of realised, like, Bruce Lee never even had a professional fight. And there's weight classes for a reason, and he'd probably be about 40 below him, so we were idiots, basically. I remember we were doing boxing for a while, or training in a boxing gym. It was Don Charles, actually, who trains Derek Chisora, who's a very successful heavyweight boxer. He was the one that kind of put us straight when we were 14 or 15, being like, 1,000 Bruce Lees would get chewed through by Mike Tyson. But it's great there where you're talking about the improv scenes, and I love this about this film and Spike Lee's films as well, where he's never afraid to have a scene that doesn't move the plot along. You don't need to, especially in this film, because there's not really a plot. But in any film, I'm always fine with the director getting indulgent, if you want to call it that, with letting a scene drag on just for the sake of it. I get the whole mantra for screenwriting. The script is just not a piece of art, it's the blueprint, and you got to learn to make sure that every word has a reason for being there. Every letter needs to either have an essential action or an essential line of dialogue to move the plot along whilst getting character development and revealing details, yada yada yada. But I'm always disturbed when you see actual film fans or critics coming from that angle. Mark Commode's another one who he always gets upset where he's like, why is Tarantino spending 10 minutes talking about burgers or doing this and stuff? It doesn't add anything to the plot. It's indulgent. And I'm like, sorry, the job of the film fan is to be entertained. And that could be because it's a big Michael Bay blockbuster, or that could be it's like a disturbing, thought-provoking art film that stays with you. But either way, that's the only point. So who gives a fuck? Who cares if it's indulgent? But I love that Spike Lee, he probably planned originally for the cornermen's moments to all be improvised. But there's obviously scenes that were written, it's in the script, it has a point, it needs to happen. But you can see where it starts being words that were in the script and becomes improv. And he kind of stays with it and doesn't cut it and keeps it. I'll take sometimes the pace not being quite right for those moments because they're just brilliant.
A lot of critics, due to the subject matter of the film, basically criticise Lee by saying, you know, this film, because of its content, would essentially be an avenue to incite actual racial violence and tension, to which Lee responded, if white people can watch The Terminator and restrain themselves from committing violence, I'm pretty sure black people can watch Do the Right Thing and do the same. The only one that he had any sort of praise for, in his view, a balanced review, was Roger Ebert, who, when it came out, it said it was just a fantastic film, and he was one of the only critics to do that.
So on Roger Ebert, he's not wrong. I love this film. It's fucking fantastic. Bit of spoiler for the end there, but it's going to be a recommendation. Like, it's a great film. Brilliant film. I'd never really watched this thing because I don't give a fuck about critics in general, which is weird when you got a film show, but we're not critics, so we only pick films we love pretty much. So I never listened to them or watch them, but I remember hearing someone tell me that he had a black wife and he was notorious for, once he married her, never given a black themed film a bad review ever. Don't know if that's true, so maybe wrong there.
I mean, it might not be true, but do you think that's because he just didn't want to be in the doghouse? She comes in with the papers and be like, 2 stars? Like, you're not getting any for the rest of the week. Like, make your own dinner. Like.
Or maybe it was that kind of, I don't know, just wanting approval as well.
Yeah.
Or maybe he liked him. Maybe he really liked him. I don't know. I don't even know if my fucking trivia there is right. So fuck it. But I agree with the sentiment. It is kind of ridiculous. And even if it does, I am a bit like, it's not a film's fault if it incites violence. Like, if it stirs something up in people, there was something to stir up already. Like, that would have been simmering under the surface anyway. It would have come up some either way. And also, there's always a critic that will say that. Critics kind of tried to do the reverse angle on Joker, saying this will incite genuine violence from angry, disgruntled white males. And it's like, even if there is a murderer who goes crazy, kills people, and you find out he watched Joker 500 times before he did it, what, are we blaming films? Are we going to ban films? Like, what's your point? Like, it's just ridiculous. You're talking about a crazy person. So it's ridiculous, but maybe it was on the fly, but you couldn't think of a better example than Terminator. That's a dumb example.
It kind of reminds me of every time there's like a big mass shooting in America, everyone's like, this is fucking GTA's fault. This is Grand Theft Auto's fault. Like, if everyone didn't play this game that glorifies guns, then this wouldn't have happened. By the way, the shootings were happening before GTA was ever released, but that seems to be the whipping boy of mass shootings. I mean, I guess it's died down a bit, but I guarantee it will happen again when the new one's released.
Because it's visual and you can do it and you can act it out in an increasingly realistic way, But I mean, realistically, it's like, what were your toys when you were a kid? You have one section which would be like a lot of cars and trucks and stuff, and then there'd be guns. Even like the cartoony ones like Transformers, he'd have rockets firing out. Like, men are innately fascinated with violence and acting out violence, even if you'd never really do it. It clearly is a natural inclination. It's not conditioned in. It's right, like I see it in my nephew. He loves rockets and cars and explosions and whatever. And that will eventually graduate as he gets older and he can watch R-rated films and stuff to like more graphic violence and stuff. But, we're naturally attracted to that. So it's this idea that because you played Manhunter when you were 14, you're going to go out and actually do that. Of course you wouldn't.
It's like, I don't score a fucking 30-yard screamer on FIFA and be like, I'm going to go out and be a professional football player because I know my limitations. I know what I don't want to do, So, we're introduced to Mr. Senor Love Daddy.
I'm pretty sure that's his radio moniker.
Well, I'm the only 24-hour DJ around, and actually listed in the credits as Sam Jackson, not Samuel L. Jackson.
He's been here for a while. He's seen a lot of these kids grow up. And he runs the station independently and basically for these people to speak to the other people in Brooklyn about what's going on right here.
I really like this character because instantly, Declan, I got real vibes of the Warriors. Nowhere to run to, nowhere to
Looks
hide.
like those crazy cats have made it all the way back to Coney Island.
One of my other favourite bit part characters, Smiley, played by Roger Smith, and he has a very extreme stutter, which is unfortunate.
He's mentally challenged.
He's mentally challenged, and he's kind of just going around preaching about Malcolm X.
Yeah, he's interesting because he's another one of those things that makes this block feel like a real living environment, because you have that, like, we got some crazy old skinny black woman who just kind of dotters around with a cane, and she sees you and she always like goes, oh, you're handsome to me, and like she is a funny thing where you notice how, I don't know if special needs women are hornier or they just completely don't hide their horniness, but I always find they're fucking really overtly sexual a lot of the time. But she's just always kind of like very friendly but clearly mental. Everyone kind of stops and gives her 5 seconds, 10 seconds little chat rather than just runs on because she's quite likable. But every area has got those kind of people, and is another great addition. And the acting is brilliant because he really sells with not just the stutter but the mannerisms and the physicality of how he sells being this special needs guy. He almost had like a Forrest Gump type role in this film where he just didn't incite anything. If you took him out of the film, I guess kind of almost nothing would change. He's kind of Chewbacca like in Star Wars. They always say like he doesn't actually affect anything, but he shows up in almost every important scene and he's always kind of like wandering about. He probably overlaps in his interactions with more characters than any other character in the film, except for the final big riot scene.
Number one, where is this woman? Because I need my ego to be inflated by her calling me handsome, this lady with a cane. So I'll have to find her.
She says it in a
show.
quite unsettling way.
Oh, okay.
You get more of a chill down your spine rather than
I'll leave it.
you puff your chest up with pride.
Obviously, he's mentally challenged. Do you think he just, in his own universe, he just feels better that he's giving out flyers of these famous civil rights activists, or am I looking too deep into it? He's serving a job. Like, he thinks he's serving a job to the community.
You always ask that during these shows, and I always feel like that's just like, you could never look too deep or too shallow. It's like whatever you want to do, it's for your fun. But firstly, for whatever reason, I do find a lot of mentally disabled people gravitate to Western black culture for whatever reason. It's just notice it a lot disproportionately, like quite a lot.
We know someone that...
Yeah, we know someone.
Yeah.
And I've seen it a lot. So for whatever, I don't know if there's a reason behind that or whatever, I don't know. I just noticed it a lot. But also, it's an interesting character placement. You kind of wonder, was he placed there beyond just being an addition to the feeling of this block and the people that make up the kind of different neighborhoods around Harlem? Because you would get a lot of that. That's just a thing you see in life. But also, special needs people, at least in the common perception of them, it's probably too much of a simplification, but in the common perception of them is they don't get bogged down by the kind of stuff you do when you get to having the capacity as an adult to understand the grim realities of life and the ins and outs and all the overall kind of like complexity of life. They're kind of viewed as like they stay almost like children, and children aren't racist, are they? They don't really have that thing. So maybe he's there as more of a purer soul who just looks at it and he's like, why don't they like them? Because they're black. That's not nice. Oh, Malcolm X is a big guy. He's a figure and he's doing... And it might just be a form of fitting in as well. He's an interesting character now that I think about it in that sense.
My thoughts on it is he's trying to like contribute in his own way, in his own head. And he's probably gone around, as you said, Declan, and noticed that people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. So he's like, okay, let me try and fit in my own sense. And what I will say and what I like is the people from the block are not rude to him. They don't bully him. They just see him as another guy, and they're actually quite kind to Smiley for this block that's meant to be in such a deprived area that people won't go to, as Sal alluded to about his pizza shop. They treated him with kindness and compassion, which was nice.
Yeah, everyone seems to like him, and he just becomes a real fixture in the film as he dips in and out. And I don't know if he adds levity, but he adds something to the scenes he's in where it kind of takes you out of the madness a bit. It's almost like, when an argument breaks out in a family and the dog gets scared, and that can almost break the tension of the moment because you're like, the dog's scared. There's a lack of understanding there that kind of brings you out of the emotion you're in, or the feeling you're in, or the tension. I don't know, it's weird.
I didn't know you had such beautiful hair.
Fool, there's a lot in this world you don't know.
I'm not stopping. I'm on my way.
So one of my other favourite characters was the mayor, played by Ossie Davis, who was in Malcolm X later, also by Spike Lee. Grumpy Old Men, The Client. He's an older alcoholic man who's basically, you know, your local wino. He's a drunk. He's really charismatic, really likeable. He's kind of a down and out loser, clearly on the surface, but he's got these pearls of wisdom, and he's probably the only character in the film that does the right thing throughout. He's great. He's great. He's just likeable right from the first scene. You see him walk into Sal's pizza shop. He's looking for a job to do, and the two brothers have been arguing about who's going to mop the floor, and he's saying, Mookie, you do it. And Mookie's like, I just got here. Fuck you. You do it. Blah, blah, blah. The mayor walks in, and he's like, is there any work I could do for $1 or $2? And Sal, who's also a wonderful man. I love Sal in this film. Played by Danny Aiello. You know, Moonstruck, The Godfather Part 2, Jack Ruby, like just a classic actor. Great voice, great, like he's always steals every scene he's in. He's iconic to me, even though he didn't have the biggest career. He's amazing. He's so likeable. He really is a good man. You can see even moments where he's given Mookie a hard time. He doesn't really want to. He's almost doing it like a son, treating a son that way. You know, you can't be your son's friend. You've got to be the dad 90% of the time. And sometimes you've got to put the friend away even as an adult and put your dad hat on and fucking do some dad shit and have a go at him or tell him where he's fucking up. And Mookie doesn't take it that way at times, or maybe takes it for granted, but he's a good man, and you see that in the way he treats the mayor, where he instantly hands him the mop and gives him a few extra dollars than he asked for as well.
In this case, you know, I'm a pizza store owner, and the character that I'm using, more than a pizza store owner, because I never really knew one of those people, but I'm using a candy store that was in existence on Stebbins Avenue in the South Bronx, and the man's name was Spectre. And he liked everybody and liked nobody. You know, we used to steal little things from there, little candy bars and so forth. And I remember, I said, when I went down there, I said, here's the guy that we all supposedly hated at the time that we were doing business with him, until we grew old and he was no longer around. He was the one we missed most. And that's the character I'm trying to define here. I'm trying to define a man who's pretty fair to everyone and bad to everybody, but equally bad to everybody.
I've seen this film about 4 times, and I always analyse the characters, and I'm always wondering, were their motives good or bad? I never got the feeling that Sal was a bad person. I can't say the same about his 2 sons. I've always been torn about Pino, Sal's oldest son's motives. In some scenes when it's just one-on-one between him and Mookie, especially a scene where he's kind of like asking him about black culture and literature and stuff like that. He's asking questions. I feel like he wants to know more, but I get the feeling that, I could be wrong, in my opinion, he does seem a bit of a racist. To me, would you agree with that? Or
I mean, I think everyone in the film is kind of racist. Like, racist has a different framing nowadays, where it's kind of like how rape is a word that covers too many things, because you have statutory rape, which is consensual sex with someone who's deemed too young to be able to consent. Technically, it's got the same terminology as Fred West kidnapping and raping children and killing them. Do you know what I mean? And in the same way, it's kind of like, to me, racist is like, you are a fucking weirdo on the edges of society who actually joins up with or the neo-Nazis, probably more common nowadays, or whatever, any group. And then you've got brackets of racist. And I feel like the majority of people in this film are racist, but they're also varying degrees of likable and enjoyable characters, and they have a lot more to it. And that's what I appreciate Spike Lee for as well, because, you know, we've talked before about the cartoony racist guy who's loud with it and has no redeeming qualities beyond that, and kind of his entire personality and existence is just about hating blacks or hating whoever or whatever, and that's just not, it's cartoonish, it's not realistic. In this, everyone has those moments. Like, you also have Sonny, who plays the owner of the Korean corner shop across the road from Sal's pizza shop. I recognised him from Fargo as remember the Asian businessman, friend that meets her for the date, and he's like, I love you. He plays the Korean corner shop owner, and he gets tons of abuse. And black American culture, they have a real clash with Asian culture. I don't know if it's maybe partly a jealousy thing. Also, just generally, everyone's capable of being racist. So sometimes finding the reason is kind of maybe not even necessary. A lot of the time I feel like even when people have reasons for something, it's reasons they come up with. They're not necessarily true. You ever seen that study where they said you can actually see genetically in your brain's wiring, they can predict how that person votes, left or right, and it's kind of predetermined. But you come up with your reasons and you don't even realize you're doing it. You're not being nefarious. You generally believe you're coming up with these reasons, but actually you have the feeling, then you come up with the reasons. Like when they nearly burned down the Korean corner shop, even though they'd done nothing, and they're fucking penniless immigrants as well coming to a white country. Like, they're not fucking part of the problem, but maybe there's some jealousy there sometimes as well, because they, you know, they have businesses and they have whatever, and they see it as, this is our neighborhood, this is a black neighborhood, like, fuck you, what are you doing here? And they don't really like the black people. They're racist as well. They don't like the black people that come in and out the shop and give them problems, like Radio Raheem when he walks in with his boombox that's blasting out Public Enemy that he doesn't seem to have any other songs in his tape deck. He's just berating him and being like, fucking learn English, motherfucker. And just giving him shit.
20 double A back, 20. Yeah. Like proper patronising.
Yeah, he's a cunt. I feel like you could accept the humour in those tensions more back then as well. You definitely could. Because some of those scenes are some of the funniest scenes as well. And most believable scenes and true to life scenes.
We even had a conversation, Spike and I and Danny and Richard, with a guy who runs a pizzeria. And he lives in Bensonhurst. He said, well, if a black person comes to my neighborhood, you know enough to know good. He said this right in front of Spike. Like, it's like Spike wasn't even there. And I was like, it was like shocking. He was just like, he said, not that I'm prejudiced.
But going back to John Turturro's character, he's resentful. He's an angry young man. He doesn't like living in this neighbourhood. Sal loves his pizza shop and he loves the neighbourhood. You know, there's a mistake he makes at the end is they're about to close up. They've already closed up, but these group of lads and the one girl that's wandering about the whole film just really want a slice of pizza before we finish it. And he's like, open up. They love my pizza. And he says it with such pride. And I don't think he hates this neighbourhood at all. And I don't think he says that, drops a few N-bombs at the end. But again, it's kind of like he's in a primal confrontational situation and he's pulling fucking words out of his Rolodex because he's angry and whatever. I'm sure you can see the way he treats Mookie, the way he's besotted by his sister and just the way he feels about the neighbourhood. He genuinely, I don't think he's racist.
Is he a racist? I don't think so. But he's heard those words so fucking often, he reached down. If it was me and I said it, I'm capable of saying those words. I'm capable. And I have said them. But I'm not a racist.
John Turturro, I think, is very resentful of the neighbourhood he in. Doesn't like black people. That's probably diluted by the fact that he enjoys certain elements of black culture. He discusses with Mookie. But also, again, you got to wonder, this is Spike Lee's film, A Black Guy. It's from his perspective, his biases. So it kind of makes sense where one of the more genuine angry racists apparently also loves black culture, and so maybe suggesting there's a jealousy wannabe factor there rather than just not liking black people, which seems like there's plenty of genuine racists who do just feel that way.
The interesting thing is Sal and his family are immigrants, second generation immigrants themselves from Italy, aren't they? So
I don't know if they're second generations. I mean, the big Italian waves that went over were back in the 19th century, I think. But they might be,
Which I guess my point is their ancestors that came originally to America might have been experienced similar things to the racism that the black culture is getting today in Do the Right Thing, but I guess
who cares about that though?
Yeah, I guess it's diluted.
What bearing does what your granddad and grandma went through in any capacity have on you and how you feel about life? Like, it doesn't, does it?
That's true.
And no one think like if it's like we were saying with the black characters feel any understanding with the Korean characters, even though that's way more argument for they should do than the Italians.
But I noticed there's one scene where they're threatening to do something to the shop and he can't communicate his point exactly how he wants to make it, elaborate it because of the language barrier. So to him, as you said, he's kind of said, I'm black as well, which obviously he isn't, but his point is, I understand where you guys are coming from.
Another one of my favourite characters, Buggin Out.
Is he?
Who, of course, is Gus from Breaking Bad. Which, bizarrely, I think this was his big break. And then there must have been a big gap, because I remember hearing that he was almost given up on acting when he got the role in Breaking Bad, playing Gus, which really, it's thrown him in. He was in, I think, The Mandalorian, so his career's completely gone through the roof now properly. But in this film, he's fantastic. He's such an agitated little fucking annoying Rottweiler. He's in that kind of Black Panthers-esque archetype black person from the 70s, I guess, but obviously bled into the 80s. The kind of guys that converted to Islam back in the day because it was like a counter option to the white Christianity, and roll around often with that Black Panthers aesthetic of the leather and the sunglasses and all that, and the berets, and just kind of like into poetry and jazz and spoken word, and a very interesting mix of things. It was always a very quite appealing whole style they had going on.
Yeah.
Right at the start of the film, he walks into Sal's pizza shop and starts ranting and raving because Sal doesn't have any black people on the walls. It's all photos of famous Italians. And I thought, you entitled little cunt. Like, what are you on about? Because Sal tells him straight, he's just like, fucking, you own a place, you can put whoever on the wall. I'm Italian, I have Italians on this wall.
Didn't emphasise him in any way. I just thought he was, like, in my opinion, I just thought he was being difficult because he wanted something. He had to have it, essentially. And again, after this, he's saying, get Michael Jordan on there. Why should Sal? It's an Italian pizzeria. Like, as Sal said, it's his business. He can have whatever the fuck he wants on the wall. I understand from Buggin Out's point of view, it's in a black neighbourhood.
So what?
But yeah, so what? Just because it is, it's a man's business that Sal later on points out to Mookie that he built with his bare hands, every single screw, every single floorboard, so which he was proud of, and he's entitled to advertise his Italian heritage, by the way. And later on, Bugging Out goes as far as saying we should boycott it because they don't have any pictures of black people on the wall. And again, I go back to the mayor who says, no, like, why should we? Like,
but to be fair, everyone says no.
Yeah,
because they're just like, Sal's nice, or he has great pizza. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm not boycotting that. Go fuck yourself.
Shit. Hey, keep walking, doctor. I don't want to hear none of your damn black foolishness. Damn. Oh, juice. No, man. No. No.
Hell no, goddammit. Sal ain't never done it to you before, man, and me neither.
I think it's political in a sense that it's personally political for those who will see it and say, I think there is a definite racism problem out there for both blacks and whites. And what I love about this film is it sort of links those two problems together in one film and says, no one's perfect, do the right thing.
And you see Bugging Out getting increasingly frustrated throughout the whole film because no one's getting in on him on this whole boycott until he gets a few people towards the end. It's nighttime, and like we said, Sal was just about to close the pizza shop, but he decides, we'll serve up these last 4 pizzas to these lot. They love my pizza, and then we'll close up. Bugging Out has finally managed to kind of get a couple of people together, including Radio Raheem, who's a fucking one-man army. He's a tank. Him and Raheem, I don't know how good friends they are. Raheem seems to just be wandering around with his boombox the whole time. He is like his little... not minion, he's almost kind of the guy that stirs everything up, but they're ready to protest and they head on into Sal's pizza shop and start shouting. And it's one of those things where once you get there, I wonder if he kind of realised a little bit how ridiculous it sounds where you're in there and you're screaming, get some black people up on the wall. And he's just like, what? Yeah. Like, no, like, what are you doing? Get out of here. It starts escalating. They start screaming and shouting at each other. And it gets to the point where Sal grabs a baseball bat. He destroys his boombox, smashes it to pieces. And there's this moment of quiet tension as you're thinking, oh, fuck, what's going to happen? It's been so loud with screaming, shouting, racial slurs getting traded, Public Enemy booming in the background. Now it's complete silence. It's kind of reminded me a little bit of the moment just before Vince Vega gives the adrenaline shot in Pulp Fiction, where it probably only took a few seconds, but it's stretched out into a longer period of time. The moment of silence breaks as Raheem jumps over the counter, drags Sal over and starts choking and beating the shit out of him, and everyone piles in trying to stop it, pulling things apart, and the girls just kind of screaming stop it in the corner.
Can I just say though, in Sal's defence, it was winding me up at it because he only plays the same fucking thing on repeat, as you said earlier, Declan, which was getting annoying for me as a viewer. And
the one bit of it as well was always the chorus.
Yeah. And like Sal said, like, he doesn't say it politely, but in Sal's defence, Declan, he says, can you essentially turn it off? It's unfair to the customers, and I don't want that loud music on repeat. And he's asked him, like, and he doesn't do it. It's not like Sal just immediately gets confrontational and violent, grabs it off him and smashes it up. There was a build up to the event, Declan, in Sal's defence. Buggin Out's crusade, it's come to a crescendo. And then you just know that this has been building up and there's going to be dire consequences, to which, due to this event, a riot is incited.
So they're attacking Sal. Sal's getting choked on the floor. It rolls into the outside street when more people start gathering around. The police finally show up, and we saw one of these police officers earlier. You know, it's the hottest day of the year, so a lot of the locals uncorked one of the fire hydrants and were playing around in the water. There's also a great moment where that fella from Sopranos, I can't remember his name now, with the white slick-backed hair, he's yelling at him in his convertible, and then as he's driving off, they absolutely soak him. He grabs a few of the police, and one of the police is this big, burly fucking white geezer, big moustache, just looks like a problem. You can tell his vibe. His partner's pretty civil. He's like, all right, guys, you know, can't be messing around a fire hydrant. The other guy, he's like, I'll come back here and crack your heads. If you mess with this again, I'll be back. You can tell he's a problem. He's waiting for trouble. And there's some of the police that end up responding to this incident. And they're trying to restrain Radio Raheem. And again, it's kind of like, on one level, you're like, hey, Radio Raheem, stop resisting the police, dickhead. And for all the other police officers, I don't really think we're doing anything wrong at all at this point. But that guy, the one with the tash, who I said would be the problem, choking him with his baton and just won't let go, even long after Raheem's completely gone limp. The other police, they were there. They were telling the guy to stop and trying to stop him. Yeah. It happened. They're very mildly culpable and for the crime. I don't know if they get fired. Like, if they should get fired. He is a murderer, the guy that's doing the choking. He straight up murdered that guy. And you could tell if it wasn't this guy, it'd probably be someone else in a few years, because you got his vibe early. Like, he was waiting. He wants something to happen. Like, he wants an excuse nearly. I'm sure he didn't intend to kill him, but he got caught up in the moment because he wasn't there in that moment. What do I need to do for police work right now? I need to restrain this guy because he's resisting arrest. He was like in... fuck you, black guy, I'm going to choke you.
Yeah, you could see from the events previously of the fire hydrant that he's a racist, I think. There's no need to debate the morality of, you know, Sal's oldest son. Is he not? Is he? This guy's a flat out racist. There's no debating it here. And you could see that he was building up to it. He was angry throughout the day. And Raider Raheem's dead. I'm not excusing it in any sense of the fact that I had a thought that the reason that it might be on the hottest day of the year, you've been somewhere where it's boiling hot and you know how angry like it makes you when it's searing hot. Sometimes you're like, oh, it's so fucking hot. Like, tensions, like, it's a fact. Like, when it's that hot, you've seen it, Declan, like in England, where, especially in the culture we have in England of everyone is drinking all day when the sun's out for a little bit, loads of fights start happening. I'm not saying that's happening here, but I think the heat plays a factor in the raising tensions as well.
Yeah, you might be right. It's definitely very intentional the way he sets it during the hottest day of the year, and it's a real, it almost feels like, again, like a part of the neighbourhood, a character in the film. To be honest, I'm lazy and happy when it's hot. I love it.
Hate it.
So the police freak out, throw his body in the back of the police car. They race off just like, fuck it, let's just get out of here. And people are fucking angry. And a big crowd's gathered. Everyone's starting to lose their shit. And they start to turn their anger on Sal. And you see Mookie, not in a moment of rage, I don't think. It seems like it was pretty like he'd thought about it. He decided. He goes and picks up a trash can and throws it through Sal's window. It's like in nature documentaries where you're seeing all the penguins huddled up by the ice and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then one finally jumps in the water and then they all start flooding in. Everyone floods into Sal's, starts smashing it up, setting it on fire, destroys it. Sal's looking on in absolute horror, like, what the fuck? Like, how could you do this to me? The mayor's trying to keep things calm, and then once he realises that he's failed and violence is erupting and Sal's place has been destroyed, he grabs Sal and his sons and he pushes them off to the side so that they're just out of it and things don't get worse. And Sal's entire business is completely destroyed and burnt to the ground.
Not just his entire business, his entire life. He's a working class guy from an Italian background. As he says to Mookie later on, he's built it from scratch. I feel so sorry for him. And can I note, before Mookie throws the garbage can in, I don't know how many times I've said his name in the review, the mayor tries to stop him from doing it. Says, please don't do that. Like, and what is funny about this is there's a lady on a stoop that the mayor obviously fancies, in it. Like,
they have a nice little go back and forth sparring thing with each other.
They have a go back and forth, and I think Mookie's sister is like doing the stoop lady's hair, and she even says, "Why are you so rude to the mayor?" And stoop lady says, "He reminds me of my tenants and whatever. Like he's just an annoying guy." And what's funny about this film is she sees the mayor as an alcoholic loser and even says it to his face, like, "You're just a blocks drunk." But throughout the whole film, yes, he may have those addiction problems. Yes, he might be the loser drunk. But he is the one that is always morally right and trying to do the right thing. Like, forget about the alcoholism. Like, he's the guy that's trying to calm everything down, as you said, Declan, like, which I find to be quite poignant in a sense. The next day, the dust has... I can't even say that, saying the dust has settled, because it hasn't. They're literally standing by the wreckage of Sal's livelihood, of Sal's business, of Sal's life, career, you know. Mookie goes back to the scene of the crime. I'm going to call it a crime because it is. Number one, Declan, he's the fucking one that started it by throwing the garbage can in, and he's come back to get his money. Because at the end of the day, from his point of view, he's still done a day's work of doing his pizza deliveries, you know. And he says, my flat rate's $2.50. I still need the $2.50. I've still done a day's work. And Sal saying, I'm standing by my burnt down fucking pizza shop that you fucking threw the garbage can into, so I'm not paying you. And he's saying, well, I did the work. I don't care if your shop's burnt down. And in the end, they're arguing back and forwards, and Sal is rightly angry. He's shouting in Mookie's face, I screwed every screw in that fucking
every tile.
Yeah, every tile, every floorboard, and it's all gone because of you guys last night. In the end, he kind of relents, and Mookie says, well, you've got money anyway, and he goes into his pocket, he gets the money out, and he screws it up. 1, 2, 3. There's 500.
What a big man!
Yeah,
He's rich.
He's rich.
He's got 500 fucking dollars. He's a big man. He's a rich fucking man. He's never gonna have any more trouble. Not Mookie. He's fucking rich.
Who the fuck you yelling at?
You're wealthy, Mookie. You're a real fucking Rockefeller.
Picks up the extra money and then throws it back at him and goes, no, it's $2.50. I'll keep 300. I'll take 50 quid extra, but I don't want to take all that. And he could have been like, let me take the 500, I want it. But he's still got that, I'm not your piece of garbage. I'm not gonna take the 500. Take it back. Do you see what I mean? Like, he's still, in a sense, stands up for himself, that he doesn't want to be belittled. Because a lot of people, Declan, in the struggle that they're in, would have just been like, 500? I'm gone. Do you know what I mean? And he doesn't do that. We're kind of left there in this sad scene where no one has won. Radio Raheem's dead. The cops still have that intrinsic racism where a white policeman has killed a black person for no reason. There's been racial tensions and racial riots. Sal's lost because he's lost his business and now he has to start from scratch. And, you know, it's a sad ending, really, Declan.
The first time I watched this film, and every time to a lesser extent, but the impact's always there, I was disgusted. Disgusted by this ending. And I don't mean Spike Lee was wrong to do it. I mean my emotional response, being caught up in the story. And obviously that was his intention, to an extent. Maybe not evoke that specific reaction, but evoke a reaction. And I'm sure he expected to get different reactions from different races and was probably also trying to, like we always say, you know, the director essentially in any moment, the point of his job is he's trying to make you feel something. That doesn't mean it's going to be to say something for everyone. It could be the whole point is that it's going to create a divide and be very interesting of how people feel in different moments, randomly bringing it back to Joker again. You know when you're caught up in a moment where you actually find yourself like cheering in the middle of a cinema and you're a bit embarrassed where you're nearly like, oh God, I actually just cheered, but I was generally into the moment of a film. I remember that tense scene at the end of Joker as it's building up to him shooting Robert De Niro's character, and it's, you know, it's tense and tense and tense, and you're in the cinema and it's that combined energy with everyone else and you're right there and it's getting to it. And when he shot him, involuntary without realizing it, unconsciously, I shouted and fist pumped. Virtually everyone else around me gasped. And I remember being like, that was interesting. That was what? Why did I have that reaction to someone murdering a guy? Do I resonate with this weirdo? And everyone around me got, I had a completely different, or it's like, you know, if you go see a film that's meant to be tragic and sad, but you're cracking up the whole time, you have different reactions. And Spike Lee has actually crafted the perfect, ambiguous, thought-provoking, stays with you. What did he mean by that? Who really did do the right thing? Ending for his film. He's done a lot of interviews. He talks a lot about the ending. I actually kind of think he's nearly talked too much. You can't have ambiguity and then kind of talk about what you meant too much, or else the ambiguity gets lost. One thing he said that I find interesting and kind of telling, also because you also see his own things he might not necessarily be intending to convey come across in his film as well, which is something that happens with directors. He talked about how, see, white people always just talk about the property damage over human life, and that tells you everything you need to know. Now, firstly on that, it kind of makes you realise that he's almost like trolling white people a little bit with the film. But firstly on that is, you don't have speak for myself, I didn't have an emotional reaction of disgust about what happens to Sal because I value the ones and zeros that make up the amounts in his bank account that's tied up in his business, or the fact that his business got destroyed and his insurance company's going to have to pay out. Like he says, it's not about the walls that get destroyed by the fire, or the pizza oven that explodes and gets destroyed, or window glass pane that gets destroyed by the garbage can being thrown through it. It's the same way that Spike Lee's own character Mookie doesn't get it when he's talking to Sal, where he just falls it all down to the insurance company will cover it. Someone died. And he's like, hey, shithead, do you not get that my life's work had gone into that? Untangible things that mean everything to me was tied up in that. And it wasn't just about, hey, this is a functional business that works. I'm sucking more currency out of the economy than I'm buying in, so therefore it's a working business and I can stay afloat. I love that people love my pizza. I get to make great pizza and people come from all over this neighbourhood to get pizza, knocking at my window last thing at night, even after I closed, desperate to get a slice, because they love my pizza. He loves his part in this neighborhood, but Mookie's got his own bias that he just doesn't see that. And it's also that thing of, it's not an either or. There's no true line where Sal's business being destroyed was even directly connected to Raheem. There was no dominoes falling of it had to happen. It did happen because emotional response from it happening. But it's not an either or thing. It's not like, I don't give a fuck that Raheem died. I give a fuck about the property damage. Sal was attacked. Sal was a valuable part of this neighborhood. Sal loved the people in this neighborhood. Sal liked Mookie and went out of his way to employ him, even though he didn't seem like a great worker. He seemed like a kind of lazy and entitled and resentful in some ways, but he also was okay with Sal, I guess. Sal had his business attacked and he was attacked. He was like, if it wasn't for Raheem dying, he was like in the middle of an attempted murder just before he died. It's tragic that he died, but he wasn't some fucking Boy Scout. He was a piece of shit himself. But again, that's the brilliance of the film. That's the brilliance of the writing. No one's two-dimensional. No situational moment is two-dimensional. This is fourth-dimensional chess. It's so multi-layered and it's so perfectly written. Look how worked up I've got. And some of it, I think it actually does kind of annoy me that Spike Lee feels that way or he's gone. But, he's entitled to it. He's got his own bias. I've got my own bias. And hey, even though I'm talking about why it's not right that he's saying that and it's not either, I've still spoken more about what happens to Sal's business than Raheem dying. So maybe he does have a point to an extent. But it's such a perfect, intriguing, divisive ending to the film that just makes you think forever about it.
In a way, I see the real ending of the film as two beautiful quotes that come up at the end. One from Martin Luther King: we can't get racial equality using violence. We're kind of stepping away from what we're trying to do here. And then you got a conflicting quote from Malcolm X: I don't see using violence in self-defense as anything bad. I see it as intelligence. And then it kind of fades and you've got a great black and white photo of them standing next to each other like that. And it really like summed up the content of the film. In a way, I see that as the ending. These two titans, you know, that wanted the same thing, Declan, but they just went about it different ways, you know.
You know, they both got shit done. There's a time and a place for both, maybe. It is weird, but, you know, because it's kind of like, I don't think anyone does the right thing. Maybe the whole film's about the impossibility of doing the right thing. Everyone in this film is angry and they're putting their anger somewhere. And most of the time it's not in the right direction. They're lashing out at this person. People know they're angry. They know they should be angry. They don't know who the person's doing it. You know, the mysterious person behind the scenes, the system, whatever you want to call it. So they put their anger out at the wrong person. And it's sad. One interesting point Spike Lee did say another time in another interview about the ending was actually that he consciously did it to save Sal. Because by directing the violence towards property, it took it away from going to a person. But again, it kind of nearly almost conflicts with other things he said, so I don't know how much you can take that as fact, but it's just an interesting point.
During the 1990s Oscar ceremonies announcing the Best Picture nominees, Kim Basinger caused some controversy when she read away from the scripts and said, "We've got 5 great films here, and they're great for one reason, because they tell the truth. There is one film missing from the list that deserves to be on it, which is Do the Right Thing, because ironically, it might tell the biggest truth of all." And Spike Lee later went on to thank her for this because it was not on there, which is a travesty. I don't know why that wasn't there.
I have to see the other 5 films, but he'll always know that he made at least one of the greatest films of this year. It was just an incredible film.
This is my 4th time watching this film, and I could finish this review and watch it straight after. That's how highly I rate this film, and Spike Lee's gone on to be an icon, rightly so in my opinion, for the subjects his films address. I'm not a black person, but he's still an icon to me because he doesn't shirk or run away from the subjects he addresses. He addresses them straight on. And he's gone on to direct some fantastic films, but to me, this will always be his best film. And I would go far as to say is, due to its impact and the time it was released and the subject matter it addresses, it could be one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah,
in that sense.
Undoubtedly, I agree. I think it's his best film, and it always have a place in my heart. It's just such an interesting film. It's almost in that Goodfellas stratosphere of relentlessly entertaining. If you put on the telly and it's on at any point from the beginning to the end, you're going to start watching it and get sucked back in. It says so much in such an interesting way with such a wide, fantastic cast. Some that were already well known, some that were kind of like found and discovered or launched with this film. It managed to explore these gritty, fucked up themes, but do it with this flair and this style and this kind of filmmaking that you just never really get with these kind of films. So it's a bit of an enigma as well, and it's just brilliantly like effortless to watch, massive rewatch value. You could watch it with 5 or 6 people and have completely different reactions between all of them, but they'll all still be thinking and talking and arguing and probably coming back to watch the film again. Just incredible film. On Spike Lee, he is a brilliant filmmaker. I love him. He's not afraid to tackle issues, but you also, he's got his massive biases. I disagree with him on a lot of stuff. Spielberg making Colour Purple, I would have no way of knowing what race the director was because it was kind of straight and play by numbers. Spike Lee, in a good way, injects his own bias and opinions into his filmmaking, not in an exposition dump kind of way, and he managed to avoid that even despite playing the main character in this film. It always comes as a in-between the lines, well-written kind of way, or just conveyed over the whole course of the story and film. But he does do that, and he seems kind of like a dickhead in real life as well, from interviews and stuff I've seen of him. He seems like a bit of a cock, but a great filmmaker, making what I think is his greatest film. So that's an easy recommendation for Do the Right Thing.